attempting to record this, and it's nice to get sound as well as vision. I'm never quite sure whether, there's a bit of sort of doubt as to whether this is about the Buddha of fearlessness or the Buddha of courage. So I thought I'd just give you a quick slogan to start the talk, which is that fearlessness is the ideal, courage is how we get there. And I'm going to divide this talk into 4 sections. So I'm going to tell you what's coming first. And the first thing I'm going to do is just spend a few minutes talking about this painting so that you know where it comes from, what it is. The second part of the talk, I'm going to look in some detail at the image in this painting and the symbolism of this painting. If you like, I'm going to try and decode the painting for you. In the third part of the talk, I'm going to just talk about a few aspects of the Buddha Amoghasiddhi which aren't in the painting. There are some things you can't put in a painting, and I'll just say a bit about them. And then in the fourth part of the talk, the final part of the talk, I'll just bring out some of the ideas about courage and fearlessness in a way that I hope will be helpful. And then I'm going to stop, and I hope that there'll be time to have either breakout groups online or discussion groups here in the shrine room. It's actually quite difficult to time one of these talks, so I kind of got a notion you'll probably have to listen to me for about half an hour or so, and then there'll be time for discussion groups afterwards, but I can't guarantee that. We'll just have to see how it goes. So now you know what's coming, let's get on with it. This painting is done by an order member called Visuddhimati, who used to be chair of this centre. Amongst her other talents, she's quite a gifted artist, and you can find quite a lot of examples of her artwork as postcards or as greetings cards down in the shop downstairs, at very reasonable prices, I should say. I got this in a skills auction that was held at the centre round about the year 2000. So it's been in my possession for about 25 years, and it used to hang in my living room, but we sort of moved it around a wee bit. And it's done in acrylic, which is quite helpful because acrylic doesn't seem to fade. So 25 years on, it's stood up well to the passage of time. It's not quite correct to say that it uses traditional Tibetan iconography. I think it's probably fairer to say that it's inspired by traditional Tibetan iconography, or if you like, it's compliant with traditional Tibetan iconography, because I can see quite an influence of European Impressionism in the painting as well. And if you look at traditional Tibetan sort of silk painting or tanka art, and often you find that it's more precise, more figurative, if you like. So, as I said, it's similar to compliant with a traditional way a traditional Tibetan artist would draw Amoghasiddhi. Visuddhimati is very big-hearted and very generous, and she says that this painting was the result of a collaboration between me and her. My response to that is to say, well, yes, we did each bring different things to the painting. Visuddhimati provided talent and hard work. I provided opinions. But anyway, that's what you're looking at. That's the painting. Okay? And I'm going to use this very high-tech pointer that I found in the back room to try and draw your attention to kind of what's in this painting, what's going on here. It's a painting of Amoghasiddhi, and what is in the painting. So, as I said, almost everything in this painting has some meaning beyond its literal appearance. I'm going to have a go at decoding it. So, let's just start with the figure in the middle. He's sitting cross-legged in full lotus position. He's got that little bump on his head. It's called an ushnisha. And he's got this sort of halo thing, which is called a nimbus. In other words, the easy bit to recognize, he's a Buddha. And a Buddha represents something about the enlightened mind. It represents some quality of enlightenment. So that's the first thing, and perhaps fairly obvious. Second thing that you're likely to notice about the Buddha, Amoghasiddhi, he's green. He's actually a dark green, the sort of colour of a leaf, particularly in late summer. So what does that tell us? He's not from our world. Buddhas in our world, the historical Buddha, have many special qualities, if you like, but they're not green. And so what that tells us, if you like, is that he comes from the realm of myth and symbol. And some people might look at it and say, oh, he's green, he can't be real. But he is real. He's real because what he represents is real. And that's one reason why he's real, but also because I think symbols are very real to people. Symbols are very powerful. I've been thinking about this while I was preparing the talk. Symbols can motivate people very, very strongly. Think about flags. Think about recent attitudes in this country, in the United States, to statues. Putting statues up, taking statues down. Also, I can't help thinking, as we're near the Arsenal Stadium, there's likely to be people out there in the street proudly wearing their red Arsenal shirts with Emirates written across the front. Symbols mean a lot to people. And I sometimes think people might be more motivated by symbols than they are by rational arguments. And Amoghasiddhi, we've said, he represents courage or he represents fearlessness. And you can't actually draw a picture of courage. You can't do it. You have to use symbols. You might draw pictures of people behaving courageously, or you might draw pictures of something that represents courage, maybe a lion or something like that. But you can't draw a literal picture of courage. You're stuck. We are stuck with symbols to represent that. Next thing to have a look at in the picture is the sky. And in all of these Tibetan images of Buddhas or enlightened beings, they always appear against a vast sky. And usually the sky is blue, clear, lovely, beautiful blue sky. But the sky here is dark. And that tells us something straightforwardly about Amoghasiddhi. Amoghasiddhi's time of day is midnight. Every one of these Buddhas of the mandala has a time. If you've been coming to these talks, we started at dawn, we went through midday, we got through sunset. Amoghasiddhi's time of day is midnight. And again, I need to just say something rather quickly about midnight. And because we're looking here at a very traditional image. It's an image that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And in ancient times, midnight was quite different to midnight in modern times. Artificial light was expensive and it didn't work very well. I read somewhere recently that at the sort of time round about year zero when these figures began to emerge, an oil lamp that would burn for an hour would cost about 41 hours of work at the average rate. So this isn't modern midnight where maybe you've gone out for the evening and the party's just livening up. Or maybe you're coming home from wherever you've been and wondering if there's anything good on stream before you go to bed. Yeah? In the past, on moonless nights, people literally couldn't see. And you get this sometimes in old comedies. There's the Shakespeare play A Midsummer Night's Dream has the characters blundering around in the dark out of doors, bumping into each other without knowing who's who. I think there's one of the Mozart comic operas, it might be Cosi fan tutte, I'm not quite sure, where much the same happens, and it's a bit bewildering to a modern person, you know. Okay, so it's dark, but they've got street lights, haven't they? No, this is proper dark. And one point I'd mention while we're on midnight, you may well know that traditional Buddhist festivals are held on full moon nights. And the full moon obviously has all sorts of spiritual associations, but there's also just a practical aspect to this. Buddhist festivals were held on full moon nights so that people could get there and get home again afterwards, so that people could literally travel. So here we are, however. Imagine you're in a forest, it's a moonless night, it's scary, with good reason. Yeah? I'd say a little bit about forests as well, because we tend to think of forests as nice places we go to on a Sunday afternoon, and there's a nice path and it takes us to a tea shop and things like that. In ancient times, forests were dense and dangerous. They were full of scary animals, they were full of scary people. And forests are quite easy to get lost in as well. So yeah, there's an element of fear creeping into all this. Next thing in the picture, perhaps a little hard to see if you're able to look right at the top. My only meaningful contribution to this picture is some stars. And if you're able to see the stars, you might actually recognize them. You've got the W of Cassiopeia, you've got the Big Dipper on the other side, and bang in the middle over Amoghasiddhi's head is the pole star, indicating that he represents a direction, and the direction is the north. And by the north, I don't mean Liverpool or Yorkshire or something like that. I mean of somewhere north of where you are now. If you're in the Shetland Islands, it's north of that. If you're in Svalbard, it's north of that. If you're at the North Pole, he's north of that. So he has a direction as well. Something else in the picture, you can just see a couple of sort of coloured blobs, white and yellow. They represent the sun and the moon. And they're like that in most Tibetan pictures because they show that the Buddha is beyond time and beyond space. I know I said a moment ago that his time is midnight and his direction is the north, and now I'm saying he's beyond time and space. But we've left the rational world behind. We're in the world of myth, symbol, and imagination. Ratnaprava drew attention to these little fellas at the bottom earlier on. You've got these weird-looking creatures that are banging cymbals together. They're called Shang creatures, and I spent a fair old amount of time Googling them without finding out an awful lot, I'm afraid. They are half human, half bird, human and animal. So you could see them as representing a union of opposites. You could see them as representing an image of transformation. They're flying around and clashing cymbals and making a fair old racket, whilst Amoghasiddhi himself is still and quiet. So if you like, Amoghasiddhi represents calm in the middle of noise, calm in the middle of danger. So there's a bit of a paradox about Amoghasiddhi. Let's just get in close and have a look at him more closely. He's wearing red robes. That's the one thing I can't quite find a meaning for, except that it's a colour that goes well with green. He's sitting on a pale green lotus, and he's making two gestures with his hands. Very, very important, very, very specific. The word we use for these gestures is mudra. It means a formal gesture which means something. This one, with his right hand, this sort of stopping the traffic gesture, represents fearlessness. And actually, I said before, Amoghasiddhi is green. And green itself is a colour of calm. It's a colour of tranquility. If you don't believe me, go to your local park and just spend some time there. You'll soon get the point about green being a colour of calm and tranquility. And then in his left hand, he's holding one of these, a double Vajra, a very specific piece of kit. Try and get mine upright like his. I was going to try and pass a couple round. I can't actually get to the shrine without getting past a burning candle. So I think if you're okay to just look at the double Vajra. And the Vajra is indestructible, and this double Vajra has all sorts of meanings, but what's probably the most useful is that it represents all aspects of ourselves developed in harmony, a balanced development of ourselves, not just bits of us. And I looked this up carefully, and where I looked it up said, well, it's easy to develop our strengths. It's easy to develop the bits that we're good at. It's easy for somebody like Emma Raducanu to get better at tennis, for example. We need to transform our weaknesses too, and that is tougher. Fearlessness comes from a full and balanced development of ourselves, so we don't have a vulnerability to worry about. And it's quite easy to say, isn't it? Not quite so easy to do. But Amoghasiddhi is there to help us overcome fear. We live in anxious times. We have plenty to be anxious about. Amoghasiddhi, if you like, is there to help us. Now that's the end of part 2 for the time being. So let's quickly have a quick look at what does the painting leave out? What doesn't go in a painting? And there's 3 things here. There's his name, his mantra, and his female companion. So let's get a quick look at each. The name, Amoghasiddhi. One of the handy things about Buddhas is that their name tells you what they're like. It would be so useful if everybody was like that, wouldn't it? You know, if you met somebody and their name would tell you exactly what kind of person they are instead of you having to find out. Amoghasiddhi. Amoghasiddhi. A means not, Moga is a blockage, Siddhi is power. And his name is usually translated as unobstructed success. This is the fellow who gets things done. Next thing, the mantra. A nice, easy mantra. Om Amoghasiddhi Hum. Yeah, okay, I'll sing it for you. The way you can set mantras to all sorts of different tunes if you feel like it. The one that we usually do goes Om Amoghasiddhi Hum, Om Amoghasiddhi Hum, Om Amoghasiddhi Hum, Om Amoghasiddhi Hum. I always find it a bit confusing because I go up when you're meant to go down and stuff like that, but it's fairly straightforward. And all I would say to you is, don't worry about the literal meaning of the mantra. You don't have to translate it into English. It's really just his name and the 3 words Om, Hum, which you find in most mantras. The idea of a mantra is to give you the kind of feel or sense of the Buddha. It's not a slogan, it's not a football chant. It may be the way I sing it, but it's not. The literal meaning is not particularly significant. It's the vibe that matters. Third and finally, what's not in the picture is that all of these Buddhas have what we call a consort, or some sort of female companion, or if you like, a female aspect of the Buddha. And Amoghasiddhi is a very important figure called Green Tara. There's an image of her over on the other side of the shrine, on the right as you're looking at it. The image is rather busy, but I think you can just about see Green Tara in there. She's a very important figure in Buddhist symbolism, Buddhist mythology. I don't really have time to say a huge amount about her now. But I suppose, I often wonder, some people might say, well, why are these Buddhas always male? Why do they have to be men? They don't have to be. Don't bother about the gender or the sex of the Buddhas. They can be either. They can be both. They can be neither. It all depends on what your mood is and what sort of works for you, if you like. There's lots more detail about Amoghasiddhi, but I think you can get overwhelmed by detail. If you look at the book where I got most of this from, there's a book called Meeting the Buddhas by Visuddhimati. Very, very good if you think this sort of thing interests you. There's a massive detail about all of the Buddhas of the mandala. You might want to know that Amoghasiddhi is part of the action family. He's got a Pure Land called Uttarakura. He looks after is the Asura realm, and so on and so on and so on. And I think we can get overwhelmed by detail, and I'm going to leave the information bit there. Which also means that if you're finding a bit of a strain looking at the picture, you can relax now. I'm going to go away from the picture and talk about a couple of other things now. But just to try and sum up what I've just said, try and imagine that you're lost in a dark forest at midnight. There are scary noises in the background, scary people, scary animals, scary things. It's a bit like an old movie called The Blair Witch Project, only it's happening to you. And suddenly, you see a bright light. This big, strong, scary green bloke appears out of nowhere with strange creatures clashing the cymbals. And you suddenly realize that this strong, rather scary looking man is actually on your side. He's here to help you, he's here to protect you. He's more powerful than anything that scares you. He doesn't just possess courage, he shares it with you. So I'm moving on to the fourth and the last part of the talk now, and just saying a little bit about fearlessness. I suppose some of you might be asking yourselves the question, well, what's all this got to do with me? I did say, at the beginning that fearlessness is an ideal. And I was a little bit wary of the idea of fearlessness because there are situations where fear can protect us. There are situations where you might want to run like heck, and that is exactly the right thing to do. I think of that incredibly fortunate man who walked away from the Indian air tragedy a few days ago. Apparently he just undid his seatbelt and legged it. Quite right too. Fearlessness can be a little bit dangerous, and I'll just tell you a quick story. It's not about me, it's about one of my daughters. She was a little baby. She'd just got the knack of crawling right. And there she was, crawling down the driveway of the house we were staying at, with a big smile on her face, heading straight for freedom and the open road. And then, we got to her, she's fine, she's still very adventurous. But you can see the weakness of that kind of fearlessness. She was too young to realize that roads are actually quite dangerous. Now, it's easy perhaps to say, well, we're all grown-ups here. We all know roads are dangerous. We look when we cross the road and stuff like that. But what I call that kind of phony fearlessness is quite easy to get. You can get it out of a bottle, basically. You can get it out of a bottle of pills, or you can get it out of a bottle of booze. And it actually places you in a situation where you are at your most confident when you're also at your most vulnerable. So let's talk about the other kind of fearlessness, the good kind of fearlessness. Talk about my other daughter and my younger daughter, somewhat older, taking driving lessons and navigating the Great Cambridge Roundabout. Some of you will know the Great Cambridge Roundabout. It's where the North Circular joins the A10. It's huge, it's complicated. There's lanes and cars going in all directions. So how does she tackle the Great Cambridge Roundabout? Well, the first thing she does is she demonstrates courage by deciding to take a driving test in Wood Green, which is probably one of the most difficult places to drive in London. I've been there with her, I was scared. And then what she does is she signs up with a driving school with a proper driving instructor, and she goes into the Great Cambridge Roundabout, guided by the driving instructor. She knows when to indicate, when to use her mirrors, what the other vehicles may do. In other words, she learns it. And she goes there again and again and again until she gets it right. Now that's real fearlessness. And as I think I've said, the way to real fearlessness is courage. There's quite a decent old Californian book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's a long time since I've read the book, but I quite like the slogan. I do quite like the title. Feel the fear and do it anyway. At least as long as it is something worth doing. So I think one thing to consider if you're afraid of something is, well, is it worth it? Is this a good idea to do? I remember having a conversation with a young friend about bungee jumping, which was something that she quite enjoyed and I thought was just completely nuts. Whereas we may find ourselves afraid of things that, really could be quite useful. I'm just trying to think. Heights, public speaking, spiders, that sort of thing. And the sort of fear that prevents us from doing things that might be quite reasonable, might be quite sensible, that we might actually want to do. There is a Buddhist tradition for how we overcome this type of fear. It goes right back to the time of the Buddha, who we believe did this sort of thing himself. And that is to meditate in what we call the cremation ground. In traditional India, firstly, they didn't bury corpses, they burnt them. And secondly, they tended to do this in a very specific place. And to some extent, this still happens today. I've seen one of these cremation grounds in India. And I can only say I was very pleased that it was not in use at the time. But often with the cremation grounds, you would find that bodies weren't fully destroyed. There'd be bones and bits and pieces lying around. And also they attracted ghosts and demons, as well as things like rats and flies. And they attracted all sorts of scary creatures, which people took very seriously in those days. But the idea was to go and meditate in the cremation grounds, to actually expose yourself to fear and deal with it like that. Now, you might quite reasonably ask yourself, well, what's a cremation ground in the UK? What do we do here? Where's our cremation ground? And the answer, my answer to that, is that it's different for everybody. You know what your cremation ground is. You know the places that scare you. They are different for all of us. And what seems to work in coping with those sort of fears is gradually exposing yourself to the situation that is scary and getting used to it. If you like, becoming gradually desensitized to it. One thing that occurred to me straight away when I was researching this talk, I haven't been to London Zoo for years, but apparently if you go there and you go to the bug house, there's something called a spider walk, where you can actually walk through a place where there are spiders on all sides of you. Now, for some people that might sound fun, for some people that might seem boring, for some people, I know a few, it could be absolutely terrifying. But that's, if you like, an example of what might be a cremation ground for quite a lot of people. So I can say to you, I'm not going to say very much about myself. I'm sorry to let you down, Vajramitra. There's not going to be a huge amount about me in this talk. It's probably be a relief for some of you. But I have actually tried this desensitization out, and it actually does work. It's not a bundle of fun the whole time, because fear is unpleasant and it's overwhelming, but it does work. Now, I need to offer a little bit of caution here. Please don't just go off and try it because I said so. I don't want to hear that somebody was absolutely traumatized or terrified because some bloke at the Buddhist Centre said, do this. If the idea of using this technique to deal with fear appeals to you, then I strongly suggest that you take proper advice from the NHS. It's all available on the NHS. That's how I got it. You may be able to use self-referral through NHS websites. You can go and talk to your GP about it. Take proper advice, by which I mean NHS approved advice. I don't mean some sort of clanky dillo charismatic alternative practitioner with a groovy website. You can get online or telephone treatment on the NHS. The only thing that you have to give up is time. There's the time you spend waiting for it, and then there's the time you devote to actually doing it. But it, you know, I'll just give one example actually from my life, going back a long time. But if you do that sort of thing, it really is something that builds confidence, it builds courage, it ultimately builds fearlessness. And I'm just thinking about one little story about myself back in the 1980s when, for the first time, the idea was suggested to me that I should go on a weekend retreat at our retreat centre in Padmaloka. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, they want me to go to Norfolk for a whole weekend. What is going to happen to me? And I tell you what happened to me. I met some very interesting people and had a good time, and was then quite eager to go back. Now, I'm kind of running out of things to say. I was wondering, how do I conclude this? How do I end this thing? Visuddhimati didn't just do this picture of Amoghasiddhi for me. She's also composed a puja to Amoghasiddhi, an act of worship to Amoghasiddhi. And I'm not going to read out the whole thing. Pujas tend to be on the long side. But I thought I'd just read out the conclusion and then stop. And dedicate my talk like that. Whoops, I'm falling over. Another trauma. Here goes. May all success gained by my efforts release beings in all worlds from the grip of fear. May my efforts bring limitless courage to all throughout immeasurable universes. May the stars of the midnight sky sing Amoghasiddhi's song of courage.